All right, I call the meeting of the Urban and Historic Preservation Commission to order for the meeting on Wednesday, March 2nd. Do we have roll call, please?
Absolutely. David Hayes?
Here, and the in-person person at the city building.
Thank you again for doing that.
For the record, no problem.
Alice Novak?
Here.
Laura O'Donnell?
Here.
Gina Pagliuso?
Here.
Trent Shepard?
Here.
And Angela Urban?
Here.
Full house, way to go.
Okay, yay, everybody's here, thank you. Next item on the agenda are changes to the agenda, and I don't think we have any. So next up is approval of previous minutes of the meeting of February 8th, which was the meeting that we had to have rescheduled thanks to snow. Are there
I noticed that there's something wrong on that it says the member attending at the city building is Gina, and wasn't it David last time?
Because Gina wasn't there.
Right, I wasn't there at all.
I will make that change.
Do you know where that was, Laura?
It's at the very beginning where it says members attending remotely, and then it says member attending at the city building.
Oh,
Good eye. I didn't notice that, and I read them top to bottom. But there you are.
Yeah, I had told Terry that I wasn't going to be able to join because I had a previously scheduled meeting that night. So
Gina wasn't there at all. That's what I thought, and I thought, well, maybe I'm thinking of the wrong meeting.
nope, you were thinking of the right meeting. I had that circled on my minutes too.
Okay.
Thanks.
Marcus, on page 3,
Yeah.
The second line, Karen Coomer, her name is misspelled. It's 2 M's in Coomer.
Kummer?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Any other additions or corrections to the minutes?
Yes, ma'am.
Of course. Yes, Trent.
It wouldn't be right if I didn't. Now let me find
I
these
know,
things.
I'm worried.
All right. So on the third page, let's see, what was that one? All right, it was Mr. Shepard. Okay, it's the right before, so it's most of the way down. The second paragraph above the voting, it says Mr. Shepard asked who the other partner would be. Maybe I said partner. I almost guess I would say party because there's 2 parties to a contract.
Sure.
So I'd like to change that one to partner or party. And then on page 5, it's David. Where was that one? Mr. Hayes. Let's see. It's the last paragraph. It starts with Mr. Hayes asked, and then that sentence doesn't make a lot of sense to me. If there was a way to levy differentiation of the uses, David, do you think you said something a little different? Levy just doesn't seem to make any sense to me. Lee,
No,
I don't know.
Well, I might have used the word leverage there. It was, my reading of that was consistent with my thinking about it, was basically, I was okay with the word levy there.
Okay, if you are. All right, it just stuck out to me. And then the last one's on page 7, the last paragraph before part 13, wherever that, okay, before announcements. And this isn't picky, but that first sentence, Mr. Hayes asks if differentiating on Lincoln Avenue, I would almost put an S on that, obviate. Differentiating obviates the necessity. So stick an S on that, and that's the end of my little nitpicking.
We will submit that change.
Any other additions or corrections?
I noticed another Karen Coomer, also on page 3 in the second paragraph.
Yeah.
Second line.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else? Can we get a motion to approve as amended, please?
I move
So
to approve.
moved.
Oh, second. No, Trent, it's yours. No, it's Trent, it's yours. You moved.
Okay, you second away, David.
Happy
All
to
right.
second away.
All of those in favor signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
I'm going to abstain since I wasn't there.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
I will say that we need to do a roll call vote since we're still.
Oh, yeah.
voting.
Yes,
We did
all
that
right.
last time. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we had a movement from Trent and a second from David. Calling the roll vote, Alice Novak,
Yes.
Laura O'Donnell,
Yes.
abstention from Gina,
Mhm. Thank you.
Trent Shepard,
Yes.
Angela Urban,
Yes.
and David Hayes.
Yes.
Okay. I will. So the second, there we go, Kumar. Okay. Kumar. All
right.
right.
Thank you for those. Next item is written communications. Do we have any written communications that are outside of anything related to the public hearing that we have?
We received no written communications that were not related to the case on the docket.
Okay. All right, so we have time for audience participation. Do we have any audience members who wish to speak on something other than the public hearing? No? Okay. Next item, continued public hearings. We don't have any. Old business, we don't have any. So the next item is new public hearings. I hereby open public hearing number HP 2022 COA 01, a request by the University Group represented by Nathan Palmisano on behalf of Pierre Milan, doing business as Chateau Normand Limited Liability Corporation, for the certificate of appropriateness to erect a property rental sign at 1404 South Lincoln Avenue. Marcus.
Okay, let me see if I can share my screen. Can you all see the Chateau Normand?
Yes.
Okay. The University Group has submitted an application for a certificate of appropriateness for 1404 South Lincoln Avenue, site of the former Zeta Tau Alpha Sorority House, a historic landmark. The COA will permit the erection of a property rental. The Historic Preservation Commission makes a final decision on the certificate subject to any appeal based on an analysis of the COA criteria, and that the commission grant certificate of appropriateness in this case. On January 5th, 2015, the Urbana City Council designated the former Zeta Tau Alpha Sorority House as a local landmark. The building, now known as Chateau Normand, is located at the northeast corner of South Lincoln Avenue and Vermont Avenue. You can see the location map here. Information on the sign will include the building address, available unit types, and contact information for the property manager, which is the University Group. The proposed sign would be located along South Lincoln Avenue. This is the site plan from the application. The sign would be approximately 11 feet in from the property line, which is on the east side of the sidewalk, so roughly 16 feet or so from the curb. It would meet, and then 72 feet down from the north side and 42 feet up from the side of the property. It would meet definition and development regulations of property rental sign and would comply with those development regulations of Table 97 of the Urbana zoning ordinance. The proposed sign qualifies as a major work because it is a permanent sign under the category site changes and new constructions. It requires review by the Historic Preservation Commission. The final decision regarding a C of A for the project must be based upon whether or not the proposed requirement for major works. There are currently no permanent property rental signs on the property. As far as a little bit of history, the building was constructed in 1928 in the French eclectic architectural style for the sorority. It was renovated in 2017-2018 through a planned unit development and renamed the Chateau Normand. Rentals resumed shortly thereafter. It had been vacant for several years before the renovation. The proposed signboard would be aluminum and would be attached to two treated lumber posts. Here's another staff-provided location map of where the sign would be located, about 10 feet in from the sidewalk and about 42 feet up from the south property line. And roughly about that size, maybe a little smaller. Here is the proposed sign design. It looks like a lot of stuff on as far as information, but it would be only 4 feet wide and 2.5 feet tall for meeting the maximum 10 square feet. As stated, it would look similar to other signs at the University Group's properties, including one at 808 South Lincoln Avenue. This is a photograph of what that looks like. This sign is much larger than what the proposed sign down at Fortune 4 South Lincoln Avenue would look. As stated in the application, the proposed sign would not affect any physical features of the building itself and would affect only a small portion of the yard. It would not affect the preservation, protection, or perpetuation of the structure as asked in the application, and would improve its economic use by advertising availability, directing potential tenants to the manager. The Historic Preservation Commission should consider the following criteria in making its determination to approve or deny a C of A. I won't go through all the criteria, but simply hit some of the highlights of staff analysis. The proposed sign would not affect the building's original qualities or character at all and would minimally affect the site. It would minimally affect the property's historic character with no change to materials, features, or spatial relationships. No changes to the site's role as a physical record are proposed. No changes are proposed to the original or added building spaces. No changes to distinctive materials, features, finishes, or construction or craftsmanship are proposed. No historic features are proposed to be replaced or repaired. No treatments are proposed. No evidence exists of archaeological resources on the site. And the only construction proposed is the sign, which will not affect historic materials or features of the building or property. This is a approximately to scale overlay of the proposed sign in scale. There's approximately 25 feet between trees on the property. When you scale it out, a 4-foot wide sign would look kind of like this. This is taken from the vantage of the sidewalk on the east side of Lincoln Avenue. Overall, staff believes that this proposal meets all of the requirements for a certificate of appropriateness. In addition to meeting the necessary requirements for a C of A, this proposal will provide necessary building location information as well as important contact information for the property manager. The Historic Preservation Commission has the following options in this case: grant the requested certificate of appropriateness, grant the requested certificate of appropriateness subject to certain conditions, or deny the requested certificate of appropriateness. If the commission finds the application is inconsistent with the criteria and denies the application, the commission should provide the reasons for denial and may recommend to the applicant ways to comply with the criteria. Based on the findings and without the benefit of any additional evidence presented tonight, city staff recommend that the HPC approve the certificate of appropriateness with the following conditions: that construction be in general conformance with the attached site plan and sign design. That is the end of my report. And I will...
Thank you. Is there a representative from the property owner that wishes to speak? Property owner or sign company?
I had been expecting Nathan Palmisano from the university group, but I do not see him on the list and not receive a contact, so he might have been having issues logging in. But he was simply going to be available to answer questions.
Okay. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against the sign as proposed?
Alice, a question, since we can only see people who are admitted to this webinar space, right? Are whoever is controlling the UPTV, are you able to see hands raised or something among participants in that way?
I'm able to see the attendee list as well, and there's one person there in addition to the camera operator, and they do not have any hands raised.
Okay.
Okay. Nobody wants to speak from the audience then. So next up is commission discussion. Who wants to start? Gina.
Well, I actually wanted to bring up the fact that we did have some written communication about this.
Yes, thank you.
Maybe we should talk about that first, or at least present it.
Marcus, it's short enough. Would you be able to read that to have it entered in our record, please?
Sure. And actually, let me go ahead and bring it up, and we can follow on the screen here. Can you see better?
Yes.
Okay. So this is from Cope Compston. He says, I live one house away from what is now Chateau Normand. Aside from having their trash flow into my yard, they are fairly decent neighbors, and it's been good to have the building cared for. I am not thrilled with the look of the proposed rental sign as shown in the packet. It is far larger than necessary, and to my eye does not fit in with the character of our neighborhood. If anyone passing by is interested in rentals there, a small sign at the door would suffice. I encourage you to either deny this request, although that would go against precedent with other buildings, I realize, or to require it be significantly smaller. With appreciation for your work on the commission, Cope.
Thank you. Okay, Gina, did you want to continue?
Sure. I guess I just had a couple of questions, and I just wanted to make sure that I'm clear on well, first of all, actually, I just noticed a typo in the staff presentation. Page 2, number 1, staff analysis. I think the second line says sing and not sign. I just noticed that while we were going over that.
Yeah, I noticed it too.
Okay. And then I guess because the staff report called this out as meeting a rental sign, I looked at the zoning ordinance for rental signs, and the only thing I could find about rental signs says that they should be removed within 14 days after the sale or rental of the property, and then shall be subject to the table that calls out what size it should be. So I'm just concerned if we're calling it a rental sign, that by calling it that, we're actually in violation of our own ordinance. Or if I'm misreading that, I would like to understand how and or why I'm misreading it. So it's in Section 9 of the Zoning Commission for Section 9 of the Zoning Ordinance, Section 4J3, where it's because it's called a rental sign in the staff report, I'm just concerned.
Okay.
Would you
Marcus?
like a response?
Yes.
Okay. The only signs that are permitted in the R7 University Residential Zoning District are property rental signs and subdivision signs. This is clearly not a subdivision as defined, and it really meet the definition of a multifamily residential sign because it's doing more than just identifying the address and the name of the property. Gina is correct that the property sale, rental, or exchange, and just share that screen. Can you all see the zoning ordinance?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Property sale, rental, or exchange signs. Signs shall not be internally illuminated and must be removed within 14 days after the sale, rental, or exchange of the property. Staff interpret this and enforce this with the presumption that there is more than likely always at least one vacant unit in an apartment building. And so we do not enforce, and there's not really any way to enforce within 14 days after all units are leased that they take the sign down. There's really no way to enforce it, and property owners would be going out and pulling out signs and putting up signs whenever they have a unit become vacant or then become filled. Does that answer your question?
It seemed like a disconnect, though. I would say the city council ought to amend this ordinance because, you know, if you've got something that's required and it's not being enforced and it's kind of unenforceable, that seems a little backward. But I understand what you're saying, even though as a landlord, I know that you don't constantly have empty apartments or ones needing rent to be rented. It can go a year, or in my case, I've had 3 years go by with a building not having any openings. So I don't know. I think we've got a problem with the ordinance more than, I don't know. It's confusing. I certainly see what you're saying, Gina. Yeah.
These permanent signs, they're absolutely normal, right, throughout Urbana. And when I moved here, my first reaction as I was looking for a place was I saw a sign. I assumed there was a place for rent. So I would contact the number and to say, you know, I'd like to look at a place, and they would say, we have nothing available. So really, it did strike me as odd. But I think part of the logic there is that they're always like willing to rent for the next year or things. It's like they're always willing to rent to somebody. They just might not have a room to rent right now, but they will if you want to talk next year. I think that's kind of part of the way they argue for it.
Well, I assume part of it too is that's their advertising. Like, oh, we don't have in this building, but we have one in this building.
Right.
But that gets onto a different topic there. But it's more advertising in general for the company rather than the specific building it's in front of.
Right. And advertising for company sign, I don't think is permitted in R7.
Yeah, and so not even a multifamily residential identification sign. So technically not even a sign that says Chateau Normand, 1404, South Lincoln. Anything larger than, I guess, an address sign, which is also limited in size, would be allowed on the property. So set a sign in front of Lincoln Green over there on, I think Michigan. You know,
Yes,
something like
Michigan
that would
and-
not be permitted.
Busey.
So part of the function of the, part of the issue is the zoning district that this is located in, and that then is the fate of any building that's in the R7 University Residential District. It really limits the sign options.
Marcus, did I read that R7 allows for like a monument sign?
I did another analysis of this just before can you folks see this Word document?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
So a monument sign is a style of freestanding sign. It's just a larger freestanding sign. Freestanding signs are not permitted in the R7 unless it is an institution. So it's possible that the sorority that is just west of Lincoln Green is either not in the R7 district, or the sorority is considered an institution because it's a sorority as opposed to a business.
You're right. That's what I read. Thank you.
Sure.
Anyone else? Comments?
Yeah.
Trent?
Let me go back to, gosh, how do I get out of this? I need to go back. Need to go back to the case. I was confused about something. It was in we're on the requirements for a COA on page 2. Number 2, staff analysis. It says, second sentence there's, the proposed sign will be bounded by 2 new trees, mitigating its effect on the view of the building. Are you talking about the 2 new trees that are already there that are pretty new, or 2 new trees that are going to go in next to the sign that aren't mentioned anywhere in the application?
The two trees that were installed, I think, last year.
Okay, the pretty new trees. Okay, the
Right.
current trees that are there. And do we have any, in the historic preservation ordinance, are there any limits on sign sizes or discussion about sign sizes?
The section, if I remember when I read it for this case, was mute on signs.
Okay,
It
So
did
we're
not
just-
even refer back to section 9 of the sign ordinance.
so did I see back on some of the sign stuff we were just looking at, was it 12 square feet was the maximum for these rental signs? Was that, and this one's
No.
8?
10 square feet.
10. Okay.
Yes, and this one's
this
4
one's
feet
8.
wide by 2.5 feet tall.
So it's
Oh,
exactly
two.
10.
So it'd be
It's
exactly
10. Exactly 10. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And now if you get nitpicky about it, that 2.5 feet also includes the little outcropping skyline of the university
Okay.
with the logo. So the majority of the board is probably only 2. But we
Okay.
don't measure it like that. We
Yeah.
do the
All right.
smallest bounding geometry.
Okay.
Marcus, is it possible to share again that page from the ordinance that shows
Sure.
the sign dimensions and then the relative to the zones?
Yes.
Marcus, I was wondering if it was documented how tall the sign will be, because I think the ordinance says it can't be any higher than 10 feet.
That is correct. And let's see.
It was in there, I think.
I'll go back and look at the application while you're finding that for David.
So this is the property sale and rental signs, R7, 10 square feet. The maximum height of the freestanding sign is also 10 feet.
So I have a question.
To the top of the little
Yeah.
sign.
So I have a question about that relative to the example that was given, for comparison, noting that it's larger, because that, if I'm reading the zoning map correctly, that property is an R5 property. And
Right.
so in theory, it should be a maximum area of 10 square feet. But on my way over here, I measured it and it's 5 feet wide by 4 feet, not including the supports, just the sign itself. And that's to the top of the tower. So it's 20 square feet minus whatever trim that would be, but the box would be 20 square feet. So I was confused as to why that was. I was struck by how large that sign seems. When you're standing in front of the apartment building,
Yes.
it's hard to actually look at the building because the sign is so prominent.
We are currently working with them on that as a compliance
Okay.
issue. So staff were notified that the sign appears to be a little larger than necessary. So staff went out and measured it, found that it was too large. And
Got it.
are
Okay.
working with property management staff to reduce that. One of the balance acts with zoning ordinances and zoning compliance is balancing how detailed to regulate and how many permits to require versus staff time to process permits and people's stomach to deal with permits. A property rental sign is actually a sign that is allowed without getting a sign permit if you follow all the rules. So people think they're following the rules and put in a sign because they're not required to get a permit for that particular kind of sign. And then it's a matter of playing catch up. I think, if I am not mistaken, there are cities where there are many fewer sign permits required, or say fence permits. Here are rules about putting in the fence. You don't have to get a permit unless you break the rules, and then we have to try and get you to fix the thing that you put in wrong. We don't require a permit for installing property rental signs.
Well, it was helpful for me to know that the sign proposed is basically half of that sign. If you cut that sign in half and rotated that one half, that would be the approximate dimension of that.
Right. Yeah. So their sign should be the same size as this sign as well.
Okay, any other questions or discussion?
Marcus, I'm not seeing a height listed on the application, so I just want to make sure that they don't put it up any taller than.
They would not be permitted to make it any taller than 10 feet. However, we can certainly add on to the condition, which currently says, in conformance with the submitted site plan, not to exceed the maximum 10 feet in height as described in table, I think 9.9.
If it were 10 feet in height, at that height, I would be able to walk under it with a foot of clearance even then.
It would look ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's only a 2.5 foot tall sign being up 10 feet. But just because it would look ridiculous doesn't mean somebody wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
You are welcome to specify a height. This sign is probably a little bit bigger than kind of large real estate signs that we use, say, for our public hearings. I think those are maybe 4 or 5 square feet. And those probably 3.5 feet tall. If you said things like, do not exceed 6 feet in height, that would allow the sign to start 4 feet from the ground and go up, 2.5 feet.
But we are in fact permitted to like approve on the condition that this be, say, 2.5 feet high for the sign, but with posts 1 foot from the ground.
That is option number 2, which is grant the certificate of occupancy based on conditions. And condition number 1 is currently follow the proposed design and site plan. And you could add a second condition of maximum sign height of fill in the blank.
I'm going to bring my design perspective to it, which is that there's such a disparity between the logo for the company and the image of the building. I mean, when it says, I don't have it right in front of me, but it said modern, something in refurbished and modern or something like that. And it didn't strike me as great marketing, but I look at this cartoon of a city from the immediately after the Second World War or something. And I mean, it seems like it would be just as effective without that skyscraper, but is it really within our province to say we approve the sign, but we don't like the design, so you got to take out the skyscrapers?
I think the whole issue though isn't that their logo or whatever?
Yeah.
Because I've seen that on multiple buildings.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's asking them to redesign.
That's why I'm asking.
I
I'm
totally
trying to get a
agree,
sense
though.
of scope. Yeah.
I agree that the two things are, the design of one does not match the design of the other, but is that?
But I don't know that they're supposed to. I mean, we're not trying to mimic the Chateau
Right.
Normand architecture.
It's, it's far less than subtle.
Yeah.
And I know that this is managed by the university group, and the letters are huge. And I think that combined with the logo, unfortunately, is just, in this particular case, it doesn't seem to be appropriate to me.
Marcus, if you go to that slide 7 that you have there, because that's not actually in the packet, but when I was driving by the other day, just trying to imagine the sign there and looking at the other one down the road, and looking at this image, I mean, it does really show you how much you're missing from viewing the building. And I do like, I understand, it seems crazy, maybe no one would put the sign 10 feet high, but I do like that idea of suggesting the height requirement, because I think something that is pertinent to us is, we want this to be a building that can be viewable, and we don't want a sign taking away from that, the beauty of the building itself.
I would like to see the sign blocking the view of a car in the parking lot instead of the building itself. And in the example picture, it does just that, but there's no guarantee it's going to be at whatever that picture looks like. That's just a guess. That in the picture, it's low.
Right.
Yeah.
So if that's an option, if we are able to do that and specify, I don't know if that's, if we're to have a motion for that or what, but I would pose a motion.
For a height limit?
Yeah.
And I would add, one of the things Cope pointed out was she would prefer a small sign closer to the building, which I think would detract more from the building than the sign that's far away from the building where this one's proposed. I think I'm more comfortable having it out here by the street than I am at where the building.
Yeah, I would agree with
At the
that.
building. In which case, what's that?
I would agree with that.
Somebody's, yeah. And I would be all in favor of saying something like the total height of the top of the sign may be no more than 6 feet or 6.5 feet or whatever number we pick from the ground, just to keep it down.
One can easily specify something quite a bit lower than that. I mean, from the landscape perspective, I am conscious that looking at this image is a kind of worst case scenario given this dimension, because the sign is probably 2 feet, 2.5 feet up from the ground. It has more surface area because there's white above that top edge of the actual sign. It's brighter, it's centered, and it has yellow lines and text with it. So it seems like if it were like just on these posts and 12 inches, like a 12-inch gap between the bottom of the sign and the ground, enough to push a mower under there, that would be sufficient, and it would be significantly less noticeable. But it would be just as effective. I'm assuming if somebody's interested in living there and they're looking for information, it will be obvious where to find it.
And I'll just also throw out there to balance the distance away from the sidewalk. The further away you put it from the reader, the larger it needs to be for them to be able to read it, especially if they're driving by or riding their bicycle. So allowing it to be close-ish to the sidewalk allows it to be small and still provide information.
Yeah, and I'm fine with the location.
Same here.
And for the reasons you just mentioned, Marcus, because
Marcus, are we able to reduce the size of the sign?
I think you could, especially if you gave a particular reasoning and if anybody could back it up with any sort of, design or planning or whatever.
I don't think it shows up in this picture. Let me move something in a second. I think it's a parking lot sign that's placed a little bit higher over on the Vermont side of the property. And it's probably half the size of the one that you've done in this mock-up here, but it still is plenty big.
I think I've got. Is this the photo you're talking about? Over here on the right?
Yeah, I don't
The
see it
little
in
brown
here.
one?
That's where it is, yeah.
What does that say?
Now leasing.
Now leasing with the phone number and little logo. Let's see.
So that's the temporary sign they have up, I guess.
Yes, yeah. I'm not able to zoom into it any better, unfortunately.
It's raised up off the ground pretty high. I mean, like taller than we are.
So
Doesn't
are we
look like
talking
it.
about this little brown sign over here?
No, it's a white sign.
Oh, those are the old signs that were illegal
Yeah, those are gone.
that we
No,
made
I
them
do-
take down.
I think it's just the towing notice for parking in the lot.
Oh, yes, yeah, right.
But it's kind of a nice size and it isn't,
Hmm.
it's just not showing up, but that's the area that it is.
I think maybe it might be somewhere here in the middle of the screen, but
Yeah.
again, not showing up very well.
That's okay.
I mean, if you want to say real estate sized, it's going to reduce the amount of stuff that they can put on it. I would say look at the criteria. If you can justify it within the criteria of the zoning ordinance, then you could put a condition on the size.
Well, in my mind, it's both the size of the sign and the styling of the sign, the design of the print and such, that make it really have an adverse impact on the historic property.
Right. And I think we had talked early on about, boy, if they did an interesting, cool script and it said Chateau Normand on it, and was more of a historic sort of marker, meanwhile adding in the information that might be palatable. And it kind of sounds like we're running into that thing of it's meeting all the development regulations as laid out by the zoning ordinance, which is 10 square feet and no more than 10 feet tall, but it's not a historic sign befitting the historic landmark.
Yeah, I mean, it's a marketing sign. And so like the color is meant to stand out, right? And so I feel like what I'm kind of wishing that the new McDonald's at the corner would have a brown arch to match the arch of the building, right? And my guess is that is not within our scope. But to the degree that we can say, recommend that this be low, I'm all for that.
Can we say low and half the size that is being proposed to be? No, I'm not joking.
Well, since site is a consideration, one other question that I had is if the primary audience for this is actually probably pedestrian, it could be vehicular too, but having a sign that's oriented so that it'd be east-west in this case with two sides is actually preferable because people walking along will be able to see it. I mean, billboards along highways are put, orthogonally. They're positioned at 90 degrees to the road. They're not positioned parallel to the road. So I don't know if that's a factor that we could discuss as well.
It's a good point.
Yeah, it would definitely be less noticeable if it was turned the other way. If you're standing or walking by, right?
To be perpendicular to the line of the road or the sidewalk. Of course, then it would need text on both sides.
Which would be giving them essentially two signs. But perhaps if they were smaller and it's possible to take a picture of the house and only see the side of the sign, then maybe it has less shock value. But it might be more readable.
Yeah.
It would minimize it in terms of viewing the building, and it would maximize it in terms of capturing the attention of passersby.
Yeah. If you're driving, you'd have a longer time to focus on it.
Hey, I did just find the height, right? The very first thing in the attachment, and I'm sorry I missed it before, it says the sign is freestanding in the yard and will not exceed more than 4 feet total height.
Oh,
okay.
Okay, so that's what, 1.5 feet off the
from
ground,
the ground. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I'm
That's
sorry, I
not
didn't see
small.
that earlier.
You caught it. So how would, so this is just a staff suggestion. How about reorienting it at its current location, at its current size, but turning it 90 degrees, which would have you seeing it more as you're approaching north or south, but if standing in front of it, you don't see it because you're looking straight at it. Now, I anticipate that they're going to be like every other building has a sign that is parallel to the street. And
Maybe this will give them the competitive edge. Maybe that's why they have to have permanent signs all the time, is because they're not oriented correctly. Yeah. I mean,
or
you know,
maybe you could give them a choice, either the sign at the current size reoriented or a smaller size still parallel to the street.
that's the consistent thing about that, is that it's about minimizing the impact within the view shed.
Right.
So that does make sense.
And it still kind of at least gives them the choice.
Is the 1.5 feet off the ground, does that seem reasonable?
It does.
If you look at those kind of standard real estate signs that pounded into the ground, that's about 1.5 feet off the ground.
Yeah. So yeah, most of the realtor signs are a nice scale, actually. Well, do we have consensus? So our things that we're thinking about are asking them to reduce the size of the sign, limiting the height, total height of the sign, and how much, including how much is off the ground, and
The orientation.
oh yeah, orientation of the sign.
The thing with the orientation though is you'd have that really ugly end though facing the street, you know, like where they're, it's not like this is a nice sign that has it wrapped, you know, like that you have the two flat ends, but then you have that, just that 4x4.
Pressure treated post.
Yeah. I think it maybe I'm overthinking things.
I think I'd rather see that post than the sign.
Yeah, I agree with you, Gina.
Same here.
And they could paint that post, you know, I mean, just a suggestion. It'd be the nicest sign in town.
So are we okay with the sign if it's reoriented and then we don't have any other requirements?
I think that 4 feet maximum height that they actually agreed to or documented, and like I said, I'm sorry, I missed that before. I think that probably, you know, addresses what we were talking about earlier about how high it is off the ground. I think I would be good with it being oriented the other way. As long as they met what they've already documented, you know, no more than 4 feet off the ground.
Yeah.
And no bigger than the size that they've documented.
Which page did you find that on, Gina?
I'm sorry, let me go back to it. It's actually part of their application.
Mm.
So it is on
Page 9, exhibit attachment.
Actually, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, it's attachment for question 4. Under exhibit B application attachment for question 4. I mean, I have it digitally here.
It's just before the sign.
Yes, I see it now. Yeah, I read that too, and I just couldn't find it when we were looking for it again. Yeah, I think that height is fine, so we could we don't need to really request anything different for the height, but I do like the idea of the reorientation. And I understand the giving them an option per se, but still I would lean more towards changing the orientation versus only just making the sign smaller and still having it face the street.
The one thing that does is it requires them to make 2 signs. I mean, it doubles the cost of producing the sign itself.
Oh, they don't have to have, well, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, no, I mean, logically.
Yeah, right.
So,
If you're a pedestrian, yeah, you could walk either way on the sidewalk right next to that.
But
Yeah,
I think the visibility, I mean, if it were me, the visibility from the car, if I were driving, would be better for east-west
Right.
oriented sign.
oh yeah.
I agree.
well, how about we give them an option then? Give an option of one that is 75% of the requested 10 square feet facing the street, or some number, or a 2-sided if they want to make 2 signs of their full requested size. It's,
I'm opposed to
I don't
giving
know.
a choice.
okay, that's fine.
I think we need to be definitive, and it sounds like
Okay.
the way we're going is that we would move to grant the certificate of appropriateness request with the condition that the sign be oriented in an east-west fashion.
Okay. I can live with
So-
that.
So, I mean, perpendicular to the street, but more importantly, perpendicular, I mean, from a marketing perspective, perpendicular to the street, from a preservation perspective, perpendicular to the facade, the main facade.
Yeah.
Well, that brings up the question though. To me, the main facade is actually not on Lincoln. It's on the other street.
Vermont.
Yeah.
So it would actually be facing the main facade. I mean,
Yeah, no, I hear you. But I shouldn't have said main there. I'm just meaning the one that from that perspective. Yeah. Yeah. Because it's removed from the other one. It's really remote from it.
If you're walking or riding your bike or driving along Vermont, you might not even see the sign because there might be cars parked blocking the view of it until you get pretty darn close to the corner.
Right. I guess Laura was correct in that. But when you get in front of it or when you get facing the oriented sign, the only thing that's behind it is front yard. It isn't the Vermont facade, unless you also move the sign as well further down the street, the Vermont side. Does that make sense?
I don't know if I'm saying the same thing as you, Marcus, but yeah, I'm wondering if they, if they're good with reorienting it, if they will then want to put it closer to Vermont, which I don't necessarily see as a problem, but if you're someone driving by and you see it, then you might want to pull over to get closer. And so just, from a marketing perspective in that sense, they might prefer it to be closer to the road where there's a pull off.
Which is closer to where the temporary sign is now, right? I mean,
yes.
I mean, it's in a sense doing that and reorienting it acknowledges both streets, but it also gives. It says that Lincoln Avenue is the place with more people coming by. Because if you just look at this image and you imagine to read what's in the sign, what's in a sense the view shed, it's pretty limited. But if you rotate it by 90 degrees, it expands really significantly for people on Lincoln Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Who's going to actually stop on Lincoln Avenue to read that? Right. The way it's shown now.
Right. I mean,
you're not going to see it for very long.
Yeah. If you were stopped in traffic going south, you might have a good moment to read it from a car, and otherwise you wouldn't. There would be no moment where it would be. But if it's rotated, you would actually have longer time with it in your view shed. I mean, that's why along highways, road signs are oriented perpendicular to the road when you need to know which exit you're on. They don't rotate it sideways because otherwise you'd be missing your exits a lot.
Okay,
And so,
is somebody ready to make a motion?
well, I just wanted to bring up one other point though. Is that something that we would suggest to them to place it then closer to Vermont with reorienting it? Because honestly, it just makes more sense, right? So than having it right there in the center like that, where it's currently being desired to be placed.
I agree with that. It seems like a much more sensible position. And then it literally takes it out. It takes it out of the view. If you wanted a frontal view, you could take a picture of this front of this building. If the cars were gone because it's spring break or whatever, you could get a clear shot of this building, period.
And then you wouldn't have to have that, the 4x4 there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Marcus, is that considered front yard on Vermont or side yard? And what would the setback be there?
They're both front yards.
So it's 10 feet?
Yes. And they'll have to like measure it out. But it's a pretty good in space there for them to be able to fit it in. So with hearing how the discussion was going, would it help to minimize the impact to the view shed if they put it at the corner with the sign itself running southwest northeast? So kind of like as you make a frame and you have it like that. So
at a 45 degree
where my
angle.
thumbs are, right. So if you were,
Then you could only see it from one direction,
Yeah.
right? You
Right.
couldn't see
you
it if
see
you're
it
going
coming down
south.
Vermont, and well, you'd see both sides from a 45 degree angle, which might not make any sense from a marketing standpoint.
But if you're going
Well,
south, you wouldn't see it very well unless you
Yeah.
turned around.
Unless you did it the other way, but then you'd have the same problem if you were going north.
I think the perpendicular is about.
I agree. I agree. And there so few people or percentage are going to be on Vermont versus Lincoln. Their market is Lincoln.
So trying to get an idea. So are you moving towards the wanting to place a condition on the sign location as well?
Yes.
Okay. So can you all see the little cursor on the screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me if I should move north, which is left, or south, which is right.
That's about the right area.
I think where it is where your cursor is a good.
Yeah, I
Okay.
agree.
Okay, so maybe then in line with the street light, which if you were standing right in front of it, then the street light would be blocking the end of the sign, technically.
I don't see the street line.
Get rid of that
Um,
4x4.
Here's the street light.
It's
Oh,
Well,
that.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know where the street light is, measuring wise. I mean, I think you would consider that 10 feet distance just oriented with Vermont. I don't know where the street sign is in relation to that 10 feet exactly. So yes, of course you wouldn't want to have it in line with that, but also something to just keep in mind. Yeah, where your cursor is now, that will really be the other side of the sign because we have to, I guess, also be aware of the 10 feet distance from Lincoln.
And there's a small tree in there. I mean, one of those trees is that area just to the right of that.
Right,
So,
right there.
yeah.
Here's-
But it's anywhere in that range that, that works from their perspective is reasonable to me.
Okay, so rather than being between the north tree and the middle tree, have it be somewhere between the middle tree and the south tree?
That sounds good.
Okay, oriented east-west.
I'm not sure why this is, but if I were to see a sign there, I'm more likely to associate it with this property as a whole. As when I when I see where it is right now, it seems like the temporary, with this orientation and location, it seems like someone's working on this place and they put their temporary advertising sign out in front of the property. It doesn't actually, like I don't think that the current location serves them very well, but I would have to really sit with that to figure out why that is. So the new location does seem to be a much better location for many reasons. The proposed location.
And then we don't have a problem. Well, if we're going to keep the sign the same size, because the 2'6" height is only a portion of the 4 feet wide, then we're still within that 10 square feet, even if it's double-sided, right?
Yeah. We never count two sides as two signs.
Okay.
All right. Motion, anyone?
I'll motion. This is Angela Urban.
And do you want to phrase your motion, please, Angie?
Sure. So I motion that we approve this certificate of appropriateness with the condition that the sign is reoriented west-east, and then also the location is altered or moved further south between, yes, the trees.
Marcus, do we need to add a second line to that about why we wanted it reoriented?
If you said like a peremptory phase, approve the certificate of appropriateness with the condition that in order to minimize impacts to the view shed of the building, of the historic landmark, that the sign is reoriented west-east.
Yep,
Yeah.
I like that.
Okay.
Yep.
And, keep typing. Sorry, when you're ready.
Does somebody want to second this?
Well, can we add, even though they put in the statement that they would be 4 feet, the code does allow, the ordinance does allow it to be up to 10 feet. So could we simply add to this also that the maximum height needs to be 4 feet or less?
Yes.
Well,
Marcus, did you already? I'm sorry.
If you keep the condition that's in there now, which is that construction be in general conformance with the attached site plan and sign design, and maybe add in application.
Great.
The
Yeah,
application spells out that they were going to do
Perfect,
4 feet.
yeah.
So I will add in application to site plan and sign design.
Thank you.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, it's been moved by Angie and seconded by Gina. Is there any further discussion on this issue? Anybody else want to speak? Okay, I'll call the vote then, please.
Okay, movement by Angela, second by Gina. Laura O'Donnell,
Yes.
Gina Paluso,
Yes.
Trent Shepard,
Yes.
Angela Urban,
Yes.
David Hayes,
Yes.
Alice Newbeck.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, the motion as, not amended, but a motion as with conditions has been approved unanimously. Thank you very much. And I now close the public hearing number HP-2022-COA-01, which related to Chateau Normand and the University Group sign. Thank you. All right, we have no new business. Any monitoring of historic properties? Staff report, Marcus?
You should have my staff report, and
Yeah.
I am to hit the highlights. There is still one vacancy on the commission. If you have ideas, please share them with your chair, and we will try and get applications and stuff from them. The Champaign County Regional Planning Commission will be hosting board and commissioner member training this summer at no cost to city board and commission members. They are going through potential topics, like, and we will let you know what is decided. This is because it's Regional Planning Commission, all of the members decide on what kind of education they want to provide to their board and commission. So it isn't just about what City of Urbana wants. There will be no charge to it, and we encourage longtime and new members to participate. I will double check with biographies we still may need. Dr. Ellis subdivision. Residents have continued work on application materials and submitted a statement of historical significance, not yet an application. Staff are going to be meeting with the chair tomorrow to discuss this, and then we'll be later meeting residents to determine future steps. There's a lot of moving parts and several options, including whether it's a historic district or perhaps a neighborhood conservation district or perhaps other option. Historic property activities. There hasn't been a lot of work, as far as I can tell, on any of our outstanding certificates of appropriateness. Work has continued on the interior of the Hotel Royer. They are working on the model rooms to show to the Hilton executives. And we're still anticipating that they're going to meet their deadline of end of the year as laid out in their development agreement. Zoning issues, I still have to work on the railing designs with Alice for 502 and 504 West Elm Street, as well as discussing the Ricker House roof with Alice. Just priorities and time. And I think those are the major things that we've been working on.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much. We have no study session. Next item on the agenda is our announcements. Anybody have any announcements? Marcus.
And this could have fallen into this DAC report as well, but the American Planning Association, Illinois State Section chapter is having a spring conference. It'll be in May. It's going to be virtual, but there are going to be mobile workshops done at the various districts throughout the state. We are going to try and have a downtown historic district walking tour for the attendees of that chapter conference. And so that's really only going to open to attendees there. That's going to be June 10th, which is a Friday. We are thinking about having a trial run or having run number one be during Historic Preservation Month and have that be open to the general public. So you can think of it either as a trial run or you can think about it that citizens get it first and then the planners get it later. If folks are interested in participating in that, maybe talking during it, I would love to have your participation. We're trying to tie this in during the conference with a session on using historical tax credits to do renovations like the Hotel Royer or like the Cohen Building to make those fabulous things happen.
Sounds great. Any questions for Marcus? Any other announcements?
I've got something.
Trent?
When Coke Compton wrote that letter about the sign, she sent it initially to several of us that she could find email addresses for on the city's website.
Mhm.
And I looked at it this morning, the website, and half of us have a contact email address listed. And I don't know that it's mandatory for us to do that, but if you never thought about it and you want to be open to the public and list your email address there, I think it'd look good, perhaps, if we all, or more of us had our contact there. So if you want to, you could look into it, and I'm sure contact Marcus to make it happen, or Terry Andel.
Okay, thank you. All right, last item on the agenda is that our closed session approval of minutes is continuing to be continued until we meet in person again. So
Okay.
hopefully.
And that might happen fairly soon with our, we still have a mask requirement in the building, but it's been reduced from KN95 to non-KN95. If we continue having improvements, in-person meetings might start.
Good. All right, last call. Anybody else have anything? Can we have a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
Thank you, David. We're adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a
Thanks,
great
Jared.
evening, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Nice work, everyone.
Yep, you guys too.
And Marcus, thanks for your patience as we meandered around toward a resolution.
Thank you for allowing me to stick my nose in without.
Well, we appreciate it.
Sure. Have a good evening.
Have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Good night.